So don't look at news as something that you watch to find out what really went on. Look at news as, think of it as a storyteller who took a bunch of facts and weaved a story that met his perspective, his or her perspective, and then they told you that story, hoping that you would believe it.
Buy it.
And buy it in some advertising they put on their website or TV. So, if they have to redefine the facts, they will.
Mm.
So you see these stories where the reporters say all kinds of things, and later on, those things turn out not to be true. They don't retract their mistakes anymore, if you notice. If they say something's not true, they just stop saying that after a while. If they want to change their mind, they just say something different. Mm-hmm. And if you watch a news channel and you watch the progression of the story, the facts of the story literally are changing. There were 2 shooters, now there's 1, now there's 3. There was two guns, now there's this gun, now there wasn't this gun. There was this many people, now there's this many people. You know, the facts are totally changing. They are reporting things as fact that they don't really even know what's going on. But they're just throwing information out there as it's fact. And they're never coming back and says, sorry, we made a mistake. We said there were 3 and now we found out there's only 2. They never say that. They just say, oh, there's 2 now. They just change the fact. Mm-hmm. And they don't repent. They don't apologize. They just change the fact, adjust the story, and continue to speak the new story as authoritative as the old story, as they spoke the old story. So news people are storytellers. And what happens when you go out on the internet and you want to find out what's going on? Let's say that you're actually a truth seeker. You really want to find out what's going on. What you end up getting is a whole bunch of stories that are crafted based on the worldview and bias of the writer, of the storyteller, yeah. And perhaps of the network that they work for, the organization they work for. And so, because the stories are told in dramatically different ways, how do you know what's true and what's not? How can you tell what really happened if you weren't there and you're depending on somebody else to tell you the story? How do you know that they're telling you a story that's accurate, or they're just telling you a story that takes the facts and fits their perspective? Mm-hmm. So, for example, if someone wants to say President Obama is a bad guy, then they'll tell the story blaming him for everything that goes wrong. If somebody wants to say nobody should be allowed to own a gun, then they'll take every story, and instead of 1 gun, the shooter will have 100 guns. So there's so many guns reported in some of these stories. There's no way the guy can even carry that many, unless he had unless he pulled a U-Haul in with a Mini Coupe or something. He couldn't have that many guns. 1 guy, how can you have 100 guns? But if you look at the story for the guys that are for gun control, they have hundreds of guns. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's true and what's not? What's happening is that because we no longer have news reporters, but we have storytellers, information is becoming very chaotic. And you can't figure out what really went on, what really happened. In fact, because they repeat the news stories over and over and over for day after day after day after day, the same story many times, you'll find that the story changes over time, and they literally change the history. They're redefining history, or they're what's called redacting history. They're changing history as they tell the story. So if you looked at the story at the end of the 3-week period or 2-week period, and at the beginning, you get a totally different historic perspective. Because they're changing the story, they're changing the facts and the presentation of the facts to meet their objective, the message that they want the story to tell. And the idea that we're just supposed to be reporting the news is totally gone. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist anymore. As far as I can tell, it doesn't exist, even though people will claim that that's the case. So, what about the truth? The truth now is completely relative to the storyteller's context. And you can look at 5 storytellers telling a story about the same event, and they will mix the facts, they will mix things, they will change the facts and shade the facts so that it fits their story. So what is a fact or an actual event or a historical event now gets lost. It's not even important anymore. What's important is that the story is told. The story is told, and the objective of the story to move the audience one way or the other is accomplished. So now they're more interested in moving our opinion, persuading us to take a particular viewpoint, than they are in giving us real news. Okay? Now, I knew it was kind of bad, but by spending 3 months looking at the news, it's not even, they don't even try to disguise it anymore. That was the most astounding thing I found, was that there was no attempt to try to disguise bias. They just come out and say what they want to say. And you know, it makes us as truth seekers, we have some very difficult choices when we're out trying to evaluate a story, evaluate what really happened. We can grab onto a version of the story that resonates with our own bias, which is what we usually do. We turn to channels until we find a news channel or a news reporter or a website that's telling the story in a way that kind of resonates with our bias. So that's the first choice we can have. The second choice we could have is we could just cobble together the stories from a whole bunch of sources and create our own version of the story.
The Storyteller.
Okay? And then tell that story, which is what a lot of people do. And that would be my tendency, is I'd take pieces from a whole bunch of places and say, okay, here's what I think happened. Now, do I know? No. I have no idea whether what I'm reporting is accurate or not, but I do know that my sources are inaccurate. So what difference does it make if I cobbled yet another story? Because there's 500, 600, 1,000, 10,000 people on the internet doing exactly that. Mashing together blogs and news stories and putting it into their version. And if all you have to do is put a keyword for any story and just have the time to sit there for hours going click, 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 clicking on blogs and links, and you will find every possible version, shaded version of that story on the internet. Okay? Or the third thing you do is you can just surrender to the chaos. You can just say, I don't know. I don't know what happened. You can surrender passively. I don't know what happened. Give me a cookie. That's a passive surrender. You can surrender skeptically. You can say, I don't know what happened, but those guys are lying to me, and I'm skeptical of everything they say. Okay, and then you're very negative towards what's being said. You can surrender violently. You can be angry about it. You know, well, how can these people lie to me? This is a horrible thing. You can surrender confusedly. You can just say, I don't know. I don't know. Throw your hands up in the air. The world that we live in, chaos is ruling.